One of the interesting things when you have a microphone in the car is listening to the amount of wheel spin. Watch Lopez right foot. Still trying to be really progressive. Left foot braking as well, of course. Karting style, and that's, you know, from his karting career and single-seater career. In these conditions, they'll be using a very, I suppose the word perhaps for a layman would be a soft mat on their throttle and gear shifting. The gear shifting is mechanical, so it's not a flappy paddle ECU system, so they can't change the rate at which the gears change, because that is governed only by the gear lever. What they will do though with the throttle map, it's a fly-by-wire, drive-by-wire throttle, pretty much as in all modern road cars, certainly in all the race cars here. So the driver will put in an input, and the brain will then match the driver input to the torque of the engine and try and feed the power in as progressively as is possible. And the driver has to be very careful in modulating the brakes and modulating gear change to make sure he's not exacerbating the low level of grip issues, not chuntering down through the gears too hard and locking up wheels.
And Martin, remember when we first developed these new TC1 regulations, especially with the turbo engines, one of the big challenges was trying to get the power delivery really, really smooth. And we were here in Hungary a couple of years ago when those regulations first came in, and it was really, really hard out of those slower corners to stop the wheel spinning, even in the dry conditions. So that is a big challenge in wet conditions. And one of the, Jimmy Thompson was saying at the end of his session, with their new Lada spec engine, the mapping of that engine not completely correct yet. And he was really finding it hard to get the power delivery down onto the circuit without it sort of kicking back and then suddenly getting a load of understeer.
And that's one of the areas where Honda have made big steps forward since the beginning of last year. Their software has really come on in leaps and bounds, and that's all part of it. You know, we're so familiar with that being a big issue in Formula One. Of course, they've got differential software as well that they can adjust to suit the weather, again, to soften off the diff, to stop it grabbing so immediately. Lopez goes quicker again, 2 minutes 12.4. Now that's the fastest lap we've seen so far, even though to my eyes visibility is worse than it was earlier, and grip therefore you would assume would be lower. He is more familiar. Undoubtedly after FP1 he'll have made more changes to the car to get it to suit himself. And as we ride with Norbert Mikulich, who is currently fourth fastest in the number 5 Honda, Norby with lots of fans watching from the grandstands. Tarquini's second quickest in his Honda. Muller third, has come back into the pits. Notable that he was following Pachito around, and you would think, well, if you're going to learn from anybody, following Pachito might be a good way to learn, and Muller clearly wants to learn. His fastest lap was just about a second slower than Lopez, until Lopez put in his last lap. You can now see he's on another purple first sector. Lopez faster again than anybody has been. And this goes back to what we were talking about in FP1 with his testing on the Nordschleife. Having done half a dozen or 8 laps, whatever it was, in a road car and some 30-odd laps in a simulator, he then went out and absolutely destroyed everybody on his first lap on a brand new track. And not just any old brand new track, a brand new track that's half the width of this and is basically hedged by trees. And Nordschleife is a very daunting race circuit, even to drive around in a road car. And Lopez clearly has got the commitment and the belief in this Citroën that he can work magic with it, and that is clearly the case. He's again faster, 2:12.43 his last lap, and he's going to be half a second and more inside that, because that wasn't a bad final sector. 2:12.2, so 1.1 seconds quicker. He is now 1.8 seconds quicker than Muller, 1.5 seconds quicker than Tarquini. There is definitely a different class, and Jose Maria Lopez is it. John Philippi being reminded to have the rear lights on his car, which presumably is another control somewhere inside that he hasn't flicked on. Tarquini, incidentally, just comes across the line 0.3 behind Lopez. So Gabriele Tarquini's last lap was an absolute barnstormer. He was 0.4 quicker than Lopez in the final sector. Looking at Thiago Monteiro, who's gone third quickest. if this weather continues into qualifying, we could have a very entertaining grid. Rob Huff, 12th at the moment. And Rob was saying an indication of how low grip the track is that the fastest time in the first free practice is around 30 seconds off a quick dry time here. He said most other tracks, when it's really streaming wet, you might be 18 to 20 seconds off. He said there is no grip anywhere near the racing line, so you have to try and stay offline as much as possible. He said the problem is you end up crossing the line 3 or 4 times during a long corner. And he said when you're on the rubber, when you're on the line, if you touch the throttle, basically you just sit still or go backwards, because all you do is spin up the wheels. Looking underneath the flat floor of the Lada, and here is Tarquini, another fastest first sector, personal best in the second sector, and in fact 2/10 quicker than Lopez on this current lap. Lopez is not on a personal best lap, but this is Tarquini again, running very wide in corner 12. So hard in those last 3 corners, 11, 12 and 13, not to be on the racing line, not to be on the rubber. So he's going the long way around the outside. Now he meets the racing line about there, but by that stage he's straight and he comes across the line. Does he go fastest of all? He does, 2:12.097. Well, that is a great lap from Gabriele Tarquini. Oh, incidentally, by the way, as we just saw him crossing the pit exit line there, talking to Miroslav Bartos, our race director, and FIA white lines apparently aren't solid white lines in the way that you and I know them. On a public road, solid wide line means you're not allowed to cross it from either direction, but an FIA white line is only solid from the inside out and not from the outside in. So you can cross it from on track and go into the pit exit road, but when you're coming out of the pits, you definitely can't, and you're only allowed to stay within it. So obviously that allows for a degree of safety when people are coming out of the pit lane. So very wet and miserable. Tarquini fastest by 21 thousandths from Lopez. And unseen by us momentarily, Qinghua Ma has gone 3rd fastest. Thiago Monteiro back in the pits, 4th. Ivan Muller, 5th. Norbert Mikulich, 6th. And Rob Huff here, 7th fastest. Personal best first sector. Not so good in the sector. He's about 1.1 seconds off. So that's not going to help him. Hot foot from the pit lane. A damp Matt Neal. Canvas shoes were not the footwear of choice for the weekend, were they, in hindsight?
Yeah, definitely not when the only pair of shoes you brought this weekend, but just back down from the Honda pit, and they've definitely had their thinking caps on between FP1 and FP2, and that's really shown with the speed Tarquini's been able to, and that's really encouraging for a great race ahead this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely right.
I'm keeping an eye on Sebastian Loeb's time. He's only 12th at the moment, and his first sector of this last lap that he's on is still 1.3 seconds off the ultimate fastest, which is Tarquini, although Lopez now goes faster once more.
Again.
And look how close it is this time. Oh no, hang on, that's half a second.
Yeah.
I thought it was closer than that, that's a shame.
It was 21 thousandths that Tarquini was faster, but yeah, as ever, Lopez just reaches down into the footwell and picks up another half a second and lobs it out.
But I'm surprised not to see Loeb as fast. I mean, I know he didn't do any practice in the first session, but he's still only 12. He's not improving lap on lap, and he's still really struggling in that Citroen.
I agree with you there, Ben. And obviously minimal track time will hinder Loeb, but the one I'm really surprised about is Muller's lack of pace at the moment. In comparison to Lopez and his wet weather prowess and his experience around the Hungaroring.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like this is new for Muller. Loeb's been here before, of course, but not in these conditions. The problem for Loeb is it'd be very easy to go too fast too soon and then bin the car again. And that's the only thing that he cannot afford. Well, he's just got to get laps in.
Yeah, he already owes the mechanics a fair few beers after FP1.
Luckily, it won't cost them too much in the centre of Budapest.
The last thing he wants to do is throw it into another tyre stack in this session. They'll be running short of parts if they keep on wearing them out like that.
Our timing screen just warned car 33 and car 10 to respect the track limits. We don't appear to have a car 10. I think maybe that was a Our screen should, car 33, 2 respect track limits, not 10 respect track limits. However, that's Qinghua Ma, car 33.
Martin, have you got your glasses on?
I have.
Oh, you have? Because it definitely says 2 on my typing screen.
Yeah, doesn't in ours, I'm afraid. The little white flash, this is entirely...
No, it does, Ben.
This
actually.
is entirely...
It does say it on ours as well.
Yeah, but only when it comes up permanently. When they flash it, this is for viewers at home can't see this, so this is entirely internal. But there's a brief flash, a white banner comes up with the message initially to attract your attention, but it's so fast that half the time you can't read it, and it's also so distorted on our monitors that the other half the time when you can read it, you can't actually read it either.
Ladies and gentlemen, Martin's first rant of the weekend.
No, it's not a rant, it's just
Muller's trying there.
Mitigation.
He's throwing the car in, definitely.
Yeah. Well, Matt, when they went out, Muller was following Lopez for a couple of laps and going as quick until Lopez then found 6th gear and started using that as well, and Muller at that stage pulled into the pits to have some adjustments.
Maybe that's what their little lever is. It's a 7th or 6th and a half gear.
Well, their little lever that they are so paranoid about telling us about is actually for manually holding the clutch at biting point. So they have a gear lever. All controls in the car must be independent of any other control. So you can't, for instance, have a manual gear lever or a manual brake lever, rather, that also operates the clutch. So if you want to operate the clutch manually, you have to have a separate control for doing that. And it can't be electronic because the clutch isn't electronically controlled, and nor is the gearbox. So you have to have a separate independent lever, and that's what Citroën have done. They came up with a couple of different ways of trying to skin that particular cat, and the one they've ended up with is actually legal. The other way that they tried before, that they proposed doing, was not within the regulations because it incorporated it into another control. So that's the answer. It is basically, as we suspected in Marrakesh, for holding the clutch at biting point, so the driver doesn't have to focus on that.
What's the problem with his foot? I mean, that's what controls a clutch normally, right?
Yeah, and so he'll get the clutch to biting point with his foot, then clamp it, use the other lever. He holds the 2 levers together when he's holding the brakes and holding the clutch, so then he can take his foot off the clutch and onto the brake pedal, which is where it'll be needed, and his other foot will modulate the throttle.
No, but you're on a handbrake.
Yeah.
You're using a handbrake, so you don't need the foot brake.
No, but it'll be over the foot brake, not over the clutch.
So why do you need that?
Well, it's one less thing that the driver has to worry about.
But I also know
once he's set the biting point, he holds it.
It's one more thing the driver's got to worry about.
Well, no, because he's holding the brake lever anyway, so he holds the 2 together and then releases them as one piece. So it holds the clutch in its position, but it has to be a lever because, of course, you have to hold the pressure, the line pressure, that is keeping the clutch in exactly the right position.
No, actually, Martin, that's the opposite. The way we always had it working, because you get the clutch to it so it's fully loaded up, and then you would leave the clutch at the start. You would release the handbrake, leaving the clutch in the consistent point. So you would start the car rolling before you release the clutch. You're on about dumping the clutch.
Well,
maybe that's why you made such a crap start in Morocco then.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, from Morocco we can surmise that it does absolutely nothing. Because he did make a shocking start, and Qinghua Ma got by the front row men right from the start, didn't he? In fact, Banani didn't have the lever in Morocco, and he made a slightly better start than Lopez. However, anyway, that's the paranoia. That's what it's all about. Loeb getting a little squirrely in the chicane.
Yeah, what is evident out there, it is still extremely slippy there around this Hungaroring today.
Yeah. Huffy's up to P3 in that ladder.
Yes, he is, and a really nice lap as well. 1.8 off. Gabriele Tarquini 0.6 off still, so Tarquini hasn't improved. He's been in the pits for the last 5 minutes.
That's a pretty impressive time from Huffy.
Yep.
Really impressive indeed.
Now, Matt, I've got a question for you. You've raced against Huffy, you've raced against Jimmy Thompson. Jimmy is a champion, Huffy's a champion. How is it that they are so different in the same car?
I've always said, Ben, it's not about driving fast. It's about feeling, it's a balance, it's a confidence. And when I drove against both of them, I would have always said Jimmy has the edge. But looking from an outsider in, at the moment, Huffy definitely seems to have the edge, whether that's with equipment. He's on a definite roll since he moved there from the all-conquering RML Chevy set up. So he's confident. He's on the crest of a wave, and that's what you need. You need a bit of an edge.
You see, the other thing I would venture is that when you were driving with James at Vauxhall, he was very much the rounded article, whereas when Rob was in British touring cars, he was still learning his trade, wasn't he? He'd come in from the Seat Cup, got his drive in touring cars, and so he was still finding his feet. Now, I would say, Rob is absolutely a fully rounded touring car driver. I mean, he is a very different beast from the young kid that was in that Seat Toledo.
Yeah.
So he's. I mean, and we can see that in his World Touring Car career, how he has progressed year by year by year to become a world champion contender, and then a world champion. So, yeah, at the time that you drove against both of them, they were a different beast. Now they're very much closer. The other factor for Jimmy and for Michael Kozlowski is that Rob, last year and this, has had the completed car at the start of the season, and they've had the one that being built in the garage in Argentina and still being built in the garage in Marrakesh and in the garage here. And so Rob has had the car that's done some miles and has got the bits worked out of it, which doesn't necessarily make it faster or make him faster, but it does mean that the car is more likely to be spending time on track and less likely to be spending time in the garage. And in the first session, James and Michael Kozlowski both spent quite a lot of time in the garage.
And you're definitely right there, but it did surprise me because, I mean, they are all equal status in that team, but Herfy was coming in and Jimmy was the unwritten, recognised number one.
Yep.
And so it surprises me. It's sort of panned out that way for Jimmy.
Well, like everything else in life, occasionally some wretched young kid comes along and turns out to be better at what you do than what you do, and that may well be the case. Now, we may, we see it in all forms of sport, all forms of racing and golf and everything else, the established order. What do you think Tiger Woods thought when Rory McIlroy came along? For the first couple of years, probably this kid's going to be a threat, and now he's looking at him going, how am I ever going to catch this kid now?
Yeah, I mean, the one disappointing thing I'm looking at the moment is they've actually, RML have brought out a load of upgrades for these Chevrolet Cruisers this year, and they are disappointing with the amount of speed they're taking to the fight against the likes of Honda, Citroen, and now Lada.
Okay, although Tom Coronel is 7th, behind him is Norbert Michelis, factory spec Honda, Sebastian Loeb, actual factory Citroen, Mehdi Banani in 12th place, actual factory spec Citroen.
We'll see in qualifying, but at the moment, you've got 7.
Coronel's 7th. There are 4 Citroens, 3 Hondas, and 3 Ladas. So that's 10 factory cars, and he's behind only 6 of the 10. So actually, I agree. In terms of outright pace, he's 2.5 seconds away, and the next Chevy is 10th, and that's Stefano D'Aste in the All-Inkle Motorsport car. So, yes, I think they would hope for more, and I wonder whether it's the wet weather that is the biggest factor here, because they were quick. I mean, we had 2 in Q3 in Marrakesh. We had Tom Chilton and Hugo Vallant in their Chevys in Q3 in Marrakesh.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
And that is accelerate, brake, accelerate, brake.
And maybe those 2 guys were the 2 that had the engine upgrade, remember?
Yeah. Maybe here it's that they're not getting as much acceleration and braking. And one thing we always know about RML cars, Matt, you've driven them, loads of drivers have, is they are never behind on the aero.
I was just about to say exactly the same.
But they're not going quick enough around the circuit maybe to really benefit from those aero upgrades. Again, Montero running out wide. I've got my corner. I'm saying that's corner 12. That's 13. The last corner is 14, isn't it? I think the chicane is 6 and 7, not just corner 6. So I have to go and draw all over the map again. But that's the big corner. That long 180-degree plus left-hander always causes problems in the wet. We've seen so many shunts there in races in the wet.
Wasn't it the final corner, 14, where Mansell went all the way around the outside in his first race for Ferrari, or first win for Ferrari?
I don't know, it might have been.
Got the win at the last corner of the last lap.
Might have been.
I'm a Mansell fan.
Too often. I'm a Mansell fan at heart as well. God loves a trier. Boy, he tried. He tried. No, I'm a big Mansell fan. Always was.
There's really different approaches going into that final corner. We just saw Thiago Monteiro very much triangulating the apex, and almost apexing early and then late, whereas Ivan was much more smooth and all the way around the outside, sticking on that line, and round goes one of the larders.
It's Luffy, Huffy, yeah, number 12.
It's Luffy.
Luffy.
Cos Luffy.
Luffy. Luffy Huffy, 26. Stefano D'Asta again being asked to respect the track limits.
He's driven up for a big fine there off the FIA. They're going to go out for a nice nosh-up meal tonight on him, I suspect.
And again, Quinnois warned about track limits. You know, in these conditions, that is slightly redundant, really, isn't it? Not rhetorical, because they're all trying to keep the car on the track. The problem is the weather is really not helping much. Yeah, nobody's gaining any benefit by running out wide onto the green stuff, that's for sure.
Yeah, and the other problem is they've got painted lines all the way around. You only have to put a wheel onto that, it sucks you out. So, and then they've got grass on the edge of some of it, so...
Well, actually, everybody's staying off the grass, because there you're just accelerating into the tyres, but it's that paint. You just sit there with the wheels spinning, nothing happens. Oop, somebody else just under the camera going off in front of Norby. Mikulic, yeah, faster first second, but first sector. Nothing much to write home about in the second, though.
They're all working their way around. They're just still trying to find these different levels of grip, different lines, trying to work it out as well as the car setup.
You know, and talk about Muller not finding a pace, nor is Norby. Again, he's just been warned about track limits, but Norby is 2.6 seconds off the pace. Tarquini is half a second, or 6/10. So Norby is 2 seconds slower than Gabrielli. Now, that's not a sentence that I would normally say, because Norby's not 2 seconds slower than Gabrielli. He's just not.
Well, on that last lap, he was slow in the middle sector because he missed the chicane, and that's why he got a track limits warning. That's basically where they're getting the pinging, is through the chicane, outbraking themselves and then missing one of the apexes. So expect a better lap if he can hook up that middle sector.
Yeah. Good on board. Listen again to Lopez. You can quite clearly hear where the car is spinning the wheels up as the engine note changes. In fact, when he was chatting to us on board, I couldn't hear what he was saying. Hopefully you did at home, but what I could hear was picking up the engine noise as well. You can hear the revs rising and falling several times through a corner.
I mean, what's hard to pick up from the in-car cameras even is the incredible noise inside one of these things. It's like being in a barrel, a metal barrel, and someone getting a chainsaw on the side. That's why you all have to have the fitted earplugs. Your headset, your radio communications are fed through the inside of the earplug, it's straight into your ear canal, so they can try and communicate with the box more easily than it is.
Well, every car in the field at the moment being warned individually about track limits. Gabriele Tarquini just was, Tom Coronel just was, 14 Mikhail Kopslowski on board with Gabrielli, still second fastest.
And of course those black and white flags in practice don't mean a thing, but when it comes to qualifying, that will, get rid of the lap that they are on. So if they go faster on that lap, they'll have to try and do another lap because it will be eradicated straight away.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, that's all part of free practice in weather like this, is to try and figure out how to get a really quick lap out of the car, Matt, without running off the road.
Yeah, it is. And Ben, I still think you can get black flagged in free practice, you know, if you have too many infringements.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, all the normal rules apply, but it doesn't delete your lap, and that's Ben's exactly right. It will delete your fastest lap if it happens to be done by not using the grey bits.
You can get a black flag in testing if you're at an MSV circuit.
Oh, as I have done this year already.
Tom Coronel almost got one yesterday, didn't he? For those of you who are on Periscope, You'll have seen Tom Coronel in the, wasn't even a free practice era, was it? In the meander behind the safety car that they had yesterday. I think we'll draw a discreet veil over the rest of that story. I think individually, Mehdi Banani has not been, and John Philippi has not been warned about exceeding track limits, and neither has the fastest man, Jose Maria Lopez.
Yeah, but Mehdi Banani and Philippi are 4 and 5 seconds off the pace, effectively.
Lopez isn't, though, and he's not being warned about exceeding track limits. So that tells you all you need to know about car 37. He is definitely in control in more ways than one. Checkered flag comes out, Daste has taken it, so too now does Mehdi Banani, Kozlowski, Thompson, they're all done, Chilton has finished. Lopez is in the pits, as is Hugo Vallant, everybody else is out. And Sebastian Loeb comes across the line with a better time, just under 2 seconds slower now.
Yeah, but up to 6th place.
Yeah, 2:13.4 though, in his defence, is the sort of time that Lopez ended session 1 with.
And it's only 2/10 slower than Muller in the same session, so that's pretty impressive.
And for Loeb, this is session 1. Woo! And Mar, again, having two or three efforts at getting the car around the corner there, Matt, as he tries desperately to roll off the brake and still have some retardation and steering left.
I was looking between the two sessions at the, Seb Loeb racing setup, and it's pretty darn impressive. It's next to the all-conquering Citroën Palaces, which they have in the paddock, and it is. I mean, the setup is.
Well, listen. Apart from when he was 18 or something, being in a privately run car, he has been run by the factory Citroën operation his entire life. It's like being a McLaren driver in Formula 3, and then in Formula 3000, and then in Formula 1. When you start your own team, you only have one understanding of how a team is run. And he only has one understanding of how a team is run, perfection in every department. And so it's entirely understandable.
Ooh,
oh.
Trying again there.
He was hanging the tail out there, wasn't he?
He's getting familiar again with the car.
Yeah. Keep it buried. This is his in-lap, by the way. But because he missed the first half hour, crashing in turn 1 on his first flying lap, he needs every single second of track time he can get at maximum attack. That's why he's not cruising in.
They might actually just want it for tyre temperatures, tyre pressures, brake temperatures, just to try and understand what the car's doing. But he's definitely trying, and he's into 12 at that point, so he's almost the pit entry.
Daddy Huff came up with an interesting question just now to me. Do you think that the 60 kilos in the Citroën will hinder or help them in the wet?
I think
yes.
weight will always hinder. It'll be less of a hindrance in the wet, but it will always hinder. You've got to drag that weight up through the gears, acceleration, and then slow it back down again, Ben. So,
yeah.
So in which case, when
it doesn't give you more traction.
If it comes to a dry session, then we really will see those Hondas in contention.
Yeah, we hope so. I hope so. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we are at the moment. Lopez is the only man, basically, who has got anything to show the Hondas. If you take Jose Maria Lopez out, just for a moment, let's do the Michael Schumacher equation and remove the fastest man. You've got Hondas, 2nd, 3rd and 5th there. So Muller is Muller is in between the Hondas. Lopez is clear of everybody, but Tarquini, Montero and Mikulicz and Rob Huff in his Lada are all within that margin that normally you'd expect Ivan Muller to be.
If you take that as the qualifying, if they started that as the grid, standing start, long run down to the first corner, it always gets busy, it always gets messy in the first 2-3 turns.
Yep.
If they can jump Lopez somehow, it is notoriously hard to overtake around here. We could have a real scrap on our hands.
And if it did end up like that in qualifying with somebody like Tarquini on the front row, we know what he's like with a standing start.
And
he's
we know
the world's greatest standing starter.
We know what he's like when he sniffs a win as well.
Yeah, exactly. And as you say, hard to get by in the dry. Can you imagine how much harder it is to get by in the rain? It's probably not quite so hard. Now, it's funny, you say it's a long run down to the first corner. Yves Maton this morning was complaining how short a run it is down to the first corner. when Alex tried to nail him about the extra wobbly lever.
That's just because he was trying to think of anything to try and divert attention.
I know.
Oh, look at those black clouds.
Conway, well, you know, it's not black clouds now, is it? It's sort of ground level. We are in cloud, almost. There's Tom's cheesy helmet. Tom Coronel looking at the timing screens. He's 9th fastest, 2.4 seconds off the pace. Incidentally, Norbert Mikkelisch and Mikhail Kozlowski and Qinghua Ma have all been summoned to race control, along with their team managers.
Well, that's a very nice thing to see. Honda in 2 and 3 after FP2. Well then, Gabriele, what's it like out there?
Very slippery, very dangerous. But it seems that our car likes these circumstances, except Lopez. I mean, he's uncatchable. It was uncatchable this morning in free practice 1. He's uncatchable now. But we are closer and closer. I mean, I don't know what I expected for qualifying. If it's better for us to be on wet, on dry. It seems that in wet condition, our car also helped by the front splitter and the front bumpers seems to work a little bit better. I mean, the weight balance doesn't mean a lot in these wet circumstances, but I know we are thinking optimistic. We are still optimistic, and we are thinking about qualifying. I mean, the weather seems not completely clean, dry, or completely wet. We will see, and we must adapt fastly on the new track.
Yeah, I mean, we've been told that there's a chance that it will clear, so not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing for you right now. As a driver in the car, how much can you tell the difference after this new package and the new upgrades on the car?
We never run with this new package on the wet, so it's the first time. We must discover also the potential of this car with the new splitter, because the downforce is a little bit improved on the front. So especially in the slippery circumstances, a slippery track like this, it helps. I mean, but we don't know how to put the best setup in this wet, because it's the first time we run with the wet.
Grazie.
Ooh la la, see you with your linguistics there, Alex Legui. And a valid point, really, from Gabriele is that they've got this whole new aero package, and we know what it does in the wind tunnel. What we don't actually know is what it does on a racetrack, and especially in these filthy conditions. So they really are trying to learn a bit of a new package here, which is not really what you need. So there are the times. And Sebastian Loeb got out with his